In the village of Nzulezo, where the ground is water and old spirits whisper through every wave, there lived a young man no one dared to love. They called him Kobina, a name that means child born on a Tuesday in the Akan language. But no one remembered the day Kobina was born. What they remembered was his size. Kobina grew up like a living symbol of strength. His shoulders were as wide as a fishing canoe. His body, solid as the roots of a baobab tree. His eyes, calm, steady, but carrying something no one could quite explain. He was the village's pride, the one they chose to climb rooftops after the rain tore them apart, the one who fetched water without complaint, the one who stayed silent in ceremonies, yet always received a nod of approval from the elders. But beneath that godlike exterior, Kobina carried a secret, one that made it impossible for him to touch a woman without leaving tears behind. I don't know if I'm a man or a test from the gods. As a boy, Kobina just thought he was a bit different. But when he came of age, when glances started to linger after moon feasts, he began to notice. No one stayed. His first love was a girl named Effia. Her smile was warm like firewood glowing beneath a clay stove. They met under the old tamarind tree, whispered promises by the quiet bend of the river. She called him Kobi. He called her Light. But that light went out. On the very night they tried to belong to each other. She wept. He said nothing. And by morning, the whole village knew. From that day on, whenever Kobina passed the docks, the air fell quiet, like water before a storm. Children whispered, women looked away, and the men avoided his eyes. No one said it aloud, but everyone thought the same thing. He's too big to be just a man. Kobina never got angry. He just worked harder, plowed longer, carried water farther, as if he was hauling the weight of his own existence on his back. But at night, when the village lights dimmed and the drums stopped beating, he was alone, with a body too large and a heart cornered by silence. I'm the man no one dares to touch, and in Nzulezo, that means I don't exist. That moon season, Kobina turned 18. In Nzulezo, that was the age when a boy was no longer just a boy. Not because his body changed, but because the way women looked at him did. Under the moonlight, the village boys danced shirtless by the river bend, tossing spears, singing, laughing. Young girls giggled behind tall reed grass, hugging pots of palm wine, their eyes flickering like fireflies in heat. But Kobina didn't laugh. He sat quietly on an old wooden canoe, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where thatched roofs floated gently on water like tired spirits, sighing. Because Kobina knew, tonight wouldn't be like any other night. Effia, the girl who had stolen his first smile, had agreed to walk home with him. Not to his parents' house, but to the small hut tucked by the nipa palms, where men took the women they loved, to become one. They walked beneath shadows of trees reflected on water, wrapped in sacred silence. Fingers touched, hearts raced. Effia wasn't afraid. She was brave. She whispered, I don't care what they say. I want to know who you really are. Kobina just nodded. He said nothing. But inside, he trembled, like the lake does when someone throws a stone into it. And when it happened, it wasn't like the songs in love ballads. There was no sweetness, no connection, only pain and blood. Effia broke into tears, not from fear, but from disappointment. She stepped back, clutching her clothes, and murmured like she was trying to convince herself. It's not your fault, but I can't bear it. Then she ran, through the palms, past the dock, past flickering lanterns not yet snuffed out. Kobina didn't chase her. He just sat there, bare, cold, and finally understood. The curse had begun. The next morning, as Kobina walked to the village well, the stairs started to change. Not admiration, but knowing. In the floating village of Nzulezo, nothing stayed hidden for long. Whispers moved faster than waves, and rumors could swim. They spread like water hyacinth roots. He's so big, no one can handle him. Must be cursed by the water spirits. Good looks and strong arms mean nothing if you're useless. His mother must have done something terrible to the ancestors. At first, it was just murmurs. Then came the shrugs, the sideways glances, and slowly, the avoidance. No more invitations to festivals. No more requests to fix rooftops. Children were told, "Don't go near him." Kobina said nothing. He just kept working. But inside, a part of him began to die. Later, he tried again. And again, with other women. Some came out of pity, some out of curiosity, but the ending was always the same. Tears. Kobina stopped looking people in the eye. He worked from dawn to dusk. And when night fell, he didn't go home. He slept by the water, where frogs and insects sang into the loneliness. On every full moon night, when the sound of festival drums echoed from afar, he'd look down at his body, the part people once said was his greatest gift, and ask himself, if a man carries a burden too heavy for love, is he still a man? In Nzulezo, the floating village adrift on ancestral waters, there were no stone walls to block out whispers. Here, gossip moved like steam, invisible, but clinging to everything. Just 1 week after that fateful night, Kobina's name was no longer spoken with pride, but in hushed tones, in muffled laughs, in glances turned sideways, not out of hatred, but because no one knew how to face him. Mothers began to whisper to their daughters, "A handsome man with no fortune is like a shell with no pearl. That boy, too big for any woman to touch." Soon, they gave him a new name, Obonsam Kumfo, the one marked by a dark spirit. But Kobina didn't need to hear the words to feel the change. He felt it in the silences, the pause in greetings, the forced smiles that never reached the eyes, the sudden quiet that fell over every group, the moment he stepped near. Children, as always, were more direct. "He brings a long knife to the market. No one can marry him. They say he hurts people. My mom says marrying Kobina is like marrying a curse." And then the men. They no longer saw him as one of their own. Some grew quietly jealous. Some were afraid. Some simply felt relieved when their wives avoided him. Even the village council, who rarely meddled in private matters, began to take notice. One morning, as Kobina sat mending his fishing net by the riverbank, a group of elders approached. They didn't speak directly, but every word carried weight. "We are a community, Kobina, and in this place, what doesn't blend in must either be healed or kept far from what is delicate." Their words, soft as feathers, hit like wind tearing off a thatched roof. Quiet, but brutal. That night, Kobina returned to the same river bend. He lowered his paddle into the water and let the canoe drift into the dark. Not to find a destination, but to escape. From the stares, from the snickers, from the body he couldn't escape. There was no moon. The water was black as oil. And he just wanted to disappear. But Nzulezo is strange like that. A place where even silence speaks. And as the lake settled, Kobina heard his own breath echo in the wind. "You are not a curse. You are a trial that hasn't been loved the right way yet." He looked around. No one. Only the breeze. But for the first time, the wind said something different. The next day, Kobina showed up like always, carried water, helped mend boats, moved with quiet strength. But inside, a seed had been planted. Not hope, not love, just a question. If this isn't my fault, can I still forgive myself? Before everything fell apart, before the whispers, before the stares that pulled away like tides, there was a girl. She was taller than anyone in the village. Her name was Zuri, but Zuri wasn't just tall. She stood above it all. They called her Muo Anam, the tallest tree in the swamp. Wherever she walked, she stood out. Not because of her dress, but because of the way she moved. Upright, unapologetic, but never arrogant, like wind through reeds, needing no permission, yet disturbing no one. Zuri and Kobina grew up together. They weren't lovers. They were companions. And sometimes, friendship ran so deep, it didn't need a name. When the children called Kobina the one punished by the gods, Zuri turned around and said, "Then maybe the gods finally got something right." When others whispered about his body, Zuri was the only one who didn't look down. She looked him straight in the eyes and asked, "What did you eat for breakfast?" And then they'd laugh, softly, but genuinely. Zuri once said, "We're two strange creatures, you and I. You carry a burden no one wants, and I carry a height no one dares to love." And Kobina had smiled, replying, "Maybe we're not garden trees. Maybe we're the kind that grow at the edge of cliffs." They once climbed the roof of a boathouse to watch the sunset. They paddled a canoe to pick wild lilies. They once lay beside each other on a bamboo floor, not touching, just listening to frogs sing and hearts beat. With Zuri, Kobina didn't have to shrink. He wasn't too much. He wasn't too dangerous. He just was. Zuri never tried to fix him. She didn't need to. She stayed. That was enough. But then, life came knocking. Zuri's father, a skilled carpenter, was offered work in a mountain village far away. They paid well, offered land, a real workshop, a future. The decision was made on a rainy afternoon, while the thatch roof leaked and the rice hadn't yet boiled. Zuri bit her lip. Didn't cry, but her eyes turned red, like someone who'd looked too long into fire. When the day came for her to leave, Kobina didn't go to the dock. He stood far off, where the bent palm tree bowed like it was saying goodbye to someone who'd never return. Zuri saw him. They said nothing. But their eyes met, like two sparks from the same flame, never meant to burn together, but born from the same fire. From that day forward, Kobina lost half his soul. No one ever replaced Zuri, because no one else was quiet enough to understand him, or strong enough not to pity him. Time passed. But whenever Kobina walked past the river bend where the purple lilies bloomed, he'd remember. Zuri once laughed so hard she fell into that very water. "We're the kind of fools," she once said, "who can't swim, but still run straight into deep water." In Nzulezo, when a family leaves, there are no farewell songs, no ceremonial send-offs. People let the water do the parting. Zuri's family boat slipped away at dawn, silent as a secret. The sky wore a coat of ash, as if even it couldn't bear to say goodbye. Neighbors stood at a distance, watching quietly. A child waved out of instinct. An old woman whispered a prayer into her hands. And Kobina stood behind an old palm tree, his eyes locked on the tall figure sitting at the bow. Zuri didn't cry. She never was the type to cry at goodbyes. But her eyes, once bright like the river at daybreak, were murky that morning, as if the current inside her had changed direction. Before she left, Zuri dropped off a small bundle at Kobina's house. No name, no note, just a worn cloth wrapped around, a bunch of dried purple lilies, and a scrap of paper marked in charcoal. "I don't know when I'll return, but if you still remember the scent of river water, then I'm still somewhere in the wind." Kobina didn't open the bundle until 3 days later, and when he did, his hands trembled too much to read the words. Not from pain, but from disorientation, from not knowing which way was forward anymore. The days that followed drifted by like cooking smoke, gray, shapeless, scentless. No one called his name. Kobina worked more than ever, as if burying himself in the mud could keep memories from rising. He began sleeping in his canoe, mosquitoes biting, rain leaking, cold slicing through skin. Because the bamboo house where Zuri once visited was now forbidden terrain to his own mind. One night he dreamed of standing neck-deep in the river. Zuri was on the other side, reaching out. But every time he swam toward her, the water pulled him back, farther and farther, until she vanished into a mist so pale It looked like the breath of the ancestors. He woke up with his hand wet, and couldn't tell if it was river water, rain, or his own tears. No one asked how Kobina was doing. They just knew he still passed the market each morning, still hauled bamboo to build houses, still quiet, like the central pillar of a shrine no one dared to touch. But something inside him had started to crack. Not to collapse, but to fall, all the way to the bottom, until he finally knew he had reached the deepest part. And sometimes, only when we touch the bottom, do we finally learn where the light comes from. 2 flood seasons had passed since Zuri left the village. The waves no longer lapped against the stilts the way they used to. Children now called someone else the new sister Zuri. And Kobina had changed too. He spoke less, worked more, and most of all, no one had seen him smile. That smile, the one that used to make girls skip class just to catch him by the docks, was now buried somewhere in a moss-covered corner of memory. Then one day, his mother, a weathered woman with dark skin and hands shaped by cold water, sat beside him and said, "You need a roof, and someone to share your bed. My heart, it won't rest easy if I leave this world without meeting your child." Kobina didn't respond, but he understood. In Nzulezo, some duties didn't need to be spoken aloud. They just were. And so, a wedding was arranged. Her name was Amma, a soft-spoken woman with eyes like dry season mornings, and a voice as quiet as still water, but never weak. She knew about Kobina's problem. She wasn't afraid, not because she was fearless, but because her love was gentle. The kind of love that believed if you waited long enough, even stone could turn soft. She told him, "We don't have to rush, we just have to be real." In the early months, they lived like 2 housemates. Amma cooked, Kobina patched the roof. They shared meals, sat by the fire, spoke of things that didn't need answers. And Kobina began to think, maybe this is the right path. No fire, but a steady flame. No intoxication, but peace. Until one night, after harvest season, with the scent of earth still on their hands, and festival music trailing like smoke in the air, Amma approached him. She said nothing, didn't wait, just laid a hand on his shoulder and rested her head against his chest. He didn't pull away, but he didn't move forward either, because he knew one step more and everything would break. But Amma didn't stop. She believed her love was strong enough to reach him, in body and in soul. But when they touched, like so many times before, Kobina's body betrayed them both. Not because he didn't love her, but because fear had taken root inside him. Amma leaned closer, but met only distance, and Kobina retreated once again. Silent, like a tree long accustomed to being beaten by storms. Amma didn't cry, not then. She simply turned her back to him and sighed. Soft, but so long that the wooden house seemed to shiver from it. A week later, she began sleeping in another room. A month later, she stopped speaking after dinner. And 3 months in, she looked his mother in the eye and said, "I love him, but love can't survive on avoidance alone." And then, on a foggy morning, just like the one when Zuri left, Amma walked out of Kobina's life, carrying nothing but a woven basket and a pair of eyes emptied of hope. No arguments, no tears, just 2 people who couldn't touch even while standing side by side. The house was empty again, the fire cold, and Kobina returned to the shadow of himself. He no longer believed in love, no longer believed in trying, and most of all, he no longer believed that there could ever be a woman on this earth who would embrace all of him, even the part he wanted to tear out and throw away. One sudden rainy afternoon, Kobina sat alone beneath the old baobab, a tree that once held Zuri's laughter, Amma's silence, and the shadow of a time before rejection. His mother approached quietly. She let out a sigh, then said, "There's someone who wants to see you. She's not here to heal you. She's here to remind you that you're still human." The woman's name was Mama Essie, a near centenarian who lived deep within the southern swamps of the village. A place where, they said, Even the birds stopped singing, just to hear her speak. She wasn't a priestess, not a witch. Mama Essie was the keeper of the village's memory. When people lost their way, they didn't go to her to be fixed. They went to remember. Kobina didn't believe, but he went. Not because he hoped, but because he had nowhere else left to go. Her hut was no bigger than a giant woven basket, thatched with dry leaves, surrounded by reeds and tangled roots half drenched in mud. Inside, light trickled through the cracks in the wall, casting faint beams onto charms, dried roots, and a single murky mirror that hung from the ceiling. Mama Essie sat there, still as a stone, her skin wrinkled like bark left too long in the sun. Her eyes clouded like morning mist. But when Kobina looked into them, he saw himself. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry. She simply said, "You are not cursed, Kobina. You're simply carrying a gift the world hasn't yet learned how to open." Kobina gave a bitter smile. If it's a gift, then why is everyone afraid of it? Why does everyone leave me? Mama Essie nodded, her gaze still fixed on the foggy mirror. Because they don't understand. And because you've never dared to look directly at yourself either. She pointed to the hanging mirror. Stand before it, but don't look at your reflection. Speak to it. Say the thing you've never dared to say to yourself. Kobina stepped forward. Wind crept through the cracks, causing the mirror to sway gently. He closed his eyes, then opened them, and for the first time in his life, he told the truth. "I'm afraid of my own body. I hate it. I don't know who I am. If that's the only thing people ever see." Mama Essie didn't interrupt. She listened, with the full silence of someone who had survived pain. Then she spoke, not with her voice, but with a legend. The old ones tell of a man blessed by the gods with a singing drum. But every time he played, those who heard it cried. So he hid it away. But one year, the land went dry, and the village needed rain. The drum had to be played, and when he played it, the skies opened up. She locked eyes with Kobina. Some things are not meant to be hidden. They exist to awaken something greater, in you and in others. Before he left, she placed in his hand a braided cord, woven from tree roots and black feathers. A mirror charm, not for banishing spirits, but for reminding, you are yourself, not what people whisper about you. That night, Kobina lay beside the hut, listening to the rain tap gently on the leaves. He didn't think, he didn't cry, he just breathed. And for the first time in years, his breath didn't carry the weight of self-hatred. That day, the sky was thick with clouds. No sun, no wind, just air, heavy and still, like Nzulezo itself was holding its breath, waiting for something it couldn't name. Kobina was carrying a bundle of bamboo from the riverside. Still the same man as every other day. Quiet, diligent, and distant, like he didn't quite belong to the world around him. Until a boat docked, a boat they didn't recognize. First came the tall silhouette, then the walk, upright, strong, unrushed, the hair tied up in the simple, graceful way women of the village once wore in their youth. And finally, the eyes. Eyes that once saw straight through Kobina without needing to speak. Zuri returned. After more than 10 floods had come and gone. No one expected her. No one invited her. She came like the full moon, on time, in rhythm, without warning. Zuri walked through the market, past the children, past the men who now carried a few more wrinkles on their faces, until she stopped. Kobina looked up, arms still full of bamboo, sweat still fresh on his brow. They locked eyes. Neither spoke. And the entire village fell silent, because no one thought they'd ever see this moment. That look, between two people who had grown up together, drifted apart without a goodbye, and lived in each other's memory like a forgotten rain, was alive again. In broad daylight, Zuri spoke first. Her voice was soft, like a paddle gliding through young marsh. "You're still standing in the same place." Kobina nodded gently. "And you still walk like the wind. No one smiled, because this joy was not for sharing. It was too private, too sacred. That night, they sat beneath the baobab tree. The place of parting now turned place of return. Zuri told him about the years away from the village. Work, trade, wrong love, leaving, falling, getting up again. And then, one night, she dreamed of Kobina, standing on the river, reaching out. "I woke up," she said, "and I knew I had to come back, not to reconnect, but to ask you if you were still alive." Kobina was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I wasn't alive. I was existing until I saw you step off that boat this morning." Zuri didn't cry. She never was one to cry easily, but she placed her hand on his and didn't let go. That night, no one saw them leave the tree. No one knew if they spoke again. No one asked. But the next morning, the little bamboo hut by the river had 2 pairs of sandals by the door. And Kobina, for the first time in years, slept until morning. Some nights, even when the wind doesn't blow, you can feel the fire burning somewhere. Not the flame itself, but the glint in someone's eye, the breath near your ear, the space between 2 bodies, closing in without a word. That night, the sky held no rain. The moon was half hidden behind clouds. The wind was soft, but hearts beat loud. Inside the familiar bamboo hut, a place once cold like a dream with no ending, 2 souls sat across from each other. Not like friends, not like strangers, but like 2 halves of something broken, now finding their way back. Zuri placed her hand on Kobina's chest. Not probing, not seductive, just a touch, gentle but rooted. Kobina froze. Just like before. Just like with Amma. Just like with everyone who came close with pressure, not understanding. But Zuri wasn't them. She didn't push. She didn't plead. She waited. And in that waiting was a strength so deep even the shadow of fear couldn't slip in. Kobina took her hand, lightly, then let go, then took it again. He whispered, "You know you're the only one I'm not afraid of?" Zuri tilted her head. Didn't speak. She just nodded, like someone who's known all along. And then they touched. Not fast. Not like in the movies, but like 2 people untangling a knot from the past. And when the thing that had once been his curse no longer hurt anyone, Kobina felt as if he'd awoken from a 10-year-long fever dream. He wept, not from pleasure, but from freedom. Zuri held him to her chest. Not like a lover, but like a mother holding a child who'd survived the long, burning night. They didn't sleep. They just lay there, hand in hand, listening to the rhythm of hearts no longer pounding in fear. They listened to peace. The next morning, when Kobina stepped out of the hut, he didn't lower his head like he had so many times before. He looked up, straight ahead, and if anyone asked, he would say, "I have loved." And this time, I didn't run. The whole village knew, and for the first time, no one whispered. Because in Kobina's eyes, there was nothing left to fear. Only a man finally returned to being human. That afternoon, the sky turned golden like honey. Sunlight fell through the baobab leaves like threads of light stitching closed the torn fabric of memory. No one knew where Kobina and Zuri were going. Only they did. And even they didn't speak. Not out of distance, but because something bigger was about to be said. The baobab tree, which had once witnessed their childhood, their parting, and the years Kobina sat beneath it like a shadow of himself, now welcomed them back with stillness. Zuri sat first, leaning gently against the trunk. Kobina remained standing, holding in his hand a piece of old cloth, the very one that once carried the bouquet of dried purple lilies Zuri had left him years ago. From his pocket, he took out a necklace, woven from faded fabric, worn wood, and a single red bead. Simple, humble, and strangely beautiful. He didn't kneel, he didn't use poetic words. He just said, "Zuri, The day you left, I didn't know how to keep living. Then I learned how to survive, but I never truly knew how to be alive." He paused, tightening his grip on the necklace. "You didn't heal me. You taught me how to heal myself. So I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking you to move forward with me. Be my wife. Be the mother of children who will never be taught to be ashamed of their bodies." Zuri pressed her lips together. A single drop rolled from the corner of her eye. Not quite a tear, just the moisture of a yes that didn't need words. She stepped forward, placed her hand on his chest, on the very place his heart once panicked whenever anyone came close, and whispered, "You don't have to ask. Because I said yes, on the day I saw you walking your boat through the rain, shielding that purple bouquet from getting wet." He placed the necklace around her neck. No ceremony, no crowd, only a heart that trembled in the hush of a soft breeze. In Nzulezo, people don't often say, "I do," or "I love you." They walk beside each other, and everyone simply knows. From that day on, Kobina and Zuri went to the market together, fetched water together, sat weaving baskets by the porch. And at night, if you passed the bamboo hut near the river, you might hear quiet laughter. Not loud, but enough to know something broken had been mended. The village children whispered, "Uncle Kobina married Auntie Zuri. The baobab heard the proposal. That's why it hasn't rained in 5 days." And the grown-ups just nodded and smiled, because in their hearts, and in the collective memory of Nzulezo, they all knew. A man once believed to be unlovable had chosen to love. And had been loved right back. In Nzulezo, weddings don't happen on land, because here, there isn't much land. Only floating bamboo planks, stilted homes leaning over the river and water, the place where all sacred things must first be reflected. That day, the village rose earlier than usual. Children bathed and tied their hair neat. Women wore vibrant kente cloth, blazing like sunset fire. The men wrapped their waists in clean loincloths, adorned with beads carved from ancient wood and seashells. They didn't come out of curiosity. They came because they owed a debt for the years they had whispered behind Kobina's back, for the glances that dodged, for the worst kind of silence, the kind that watches someone suffer and pretends not to see. The elders didn't speak it aloud, but everyone understood. This wedding wasn't just for 2 people. It was for the village, choosing to step out of fear and into blessing. A large floating raft was built from bamboo, tied with water hyacinth vines, covered in red cloth, and left to drift on the river. That was their sanctuary, no roof, no walls, only the sky and water as witnesses. Kobina stepped onto the raft first, wearing a plain white shirt, broad-shouldered, hands steady. He didn't tremble, didn't avoid a single gaze, because today, he was no longer the shunned one. He was the chosen one, chosen by a woman who had seen both his light and his shadow. Then came Zuri, arriving in a small canoe, a crown of white flowers on her head, a bouquet of purple lilies in her hands, the flowers of their old goodbye. No one breathed, no one moved, because in that moment, Nzulezo's history was being rewritten. When Zuri stepped onto the raft, Kobina held out his hand. She took it, not like a handshake, but like 2 pieces of a soul finally finding their way back. The village elder stood between them, gripping a carved wooden staff etched with ancestral symbols, and struck the bamboo floor 3 times. Today, no one is unseen. No one is outcast. We are not just marrying a couple. We are marrying back our own conscience. Then the village began to sing, an old song only sung when miracles happen. Those once lost in storms now found beneath moonlight. Those once cursed, now called blessing. The ceremony didn't last long. No feast, no grand speeches, just laughter, and a tight embrace from Kobina's mother, the woman who had once prayed every night to the ancestors. "Please, let my son not drown in the body he was born into." Now she wept, but from joy, because she had lived to see Kobina smiling, and Zuri smiling back. That night, on the water, dozens of lanterns floated quietly, and someone from the village joked, "If any ancestors watching tonight, they're probably laughing and raising a glass." Time flowed like the river beneath Nzulezo, never rushed, never still, but carrying everything with it. Kobina and Zuri didn't live like heroes. They didn't open a school, didn't become rich, didn't lead the village. They simply lived in every sense of the word. Each morning, Zuri boiled water. Kobina mended nets. Each afternoon, they sat on the porch, watching children dash across the wooden bridge, corn cakes in hand, songs on their lips. Then one day, a little boy turned to his mother and asked, "Mama, why do people always come to Mr. Kobina's house?" The mother smiled, patting his head, because he used to be the man no one dared to sit beside. Now, he's the one everyone wants to sit next to. No one called Kobina the cursed one anymore. They called him the storyteller, the man with the deep voice, the quiet eyes, and a heart that had once broken, but learned how to piece itself back together. Zuri, now the mother of 3, 2 girls, 1 boy, taught her children things you wouldn't find in books. When you meet someone who's different, don't ask why. Ask, how far can I walk beside them? The old bamboo hut had become the warmest home in the village, not because of wealth, but because of laughter. The ancient baobab still stood tall, but its base was no longer a place of farewells. It had become the spot where young couples came to propose. The village children grew up hearing a story. Long ago, there was a man so large no one dared to touch him, until one woman reached not with her hands, but with a fearless heart, and touched the deepest part of him. And when they asked, "Who was he?" the elders would smile. "He was one of us, a man once shunned, who taught a village how to welcome again." The wound never vanished. It remained, like the scar on the baobab's bark, but it didn't hurt anymore, because it had become part of the legend, part of the legacy. Some stories don't need magic, just someone willing to wait, and someone brave enough to return. Kobina wasn't a hero. He was a reminder of a deeper truth. Sometimes our bodies aren't broken. It's the world that hasn't learned to look beyond the surface. If you've ever been told you were too much, if you've ever been judged for something you didn't choose, if you've ever struggled to live inside a version of yourself the world decided for you, you are not alone. And maybe your wound today is someone else's healing tomorrow. This is Tales of Black, where black stories are spoken out loud and silence is shattered. If you saw yourself in this story, share it. Because somewhere out there, someone else is still waiting for their Zuri. Click like if your heart stirred. Leave a comment if you've ever been misunderstood. And subscribe, not for the algorithm, but because we are rewriting history with voices the world never paused to hear. We'll see you again in the next story, where we don't just listen, we understand. We don't just tell, we heal.